Hello, everyone, and welcome to Claris Community Live. I'm Rosemary Teege, the Community Engagement Manager here at Claris, and joining me today from Claris is Tyler Furman, and my panel today to discuss when downtime costs real money, building resilient FileMaker systems are Kent Lendrum from Kmar, Claus Lavendt from Datamatics, Angelo Luchi from Proofgeist, and Wim Decorte from Soliant. And as we get started, please do answer my opening poll questions just to let us know how far you are in your business continuity planning and to let us know which concerns you most or which major risk concerns you most. And while you do that, I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves and just share like a short snippet of some recent business continuity problem that you or one of your clients has encountered. And I guess, Kent, I'll let you start.
Thanks, Rosemary. Nothing like waking me up at this time of the morning. Hi, I'm Kent from Kmart, based in New Zealand. We support about 400 clients across the country, and I guess you can imagine we've heard every sort of scenario of business continuity that has failed for one reason or another over the years. And I guess the most recent one that I can think of is cyber attack, and we'll talk about those sorts of fun and games that go with those later on.
And Klaus, I'm just going to go around the loop on my screen. So if you're next.
Oh, you're on mute, Klaus.
I'll start over again, sorry. I'm Claus Lavendt from Datamatics in Denmark. We do development for all types of customers and do custom hosting as well. I had an experience with one of our customers that right before Christmas, they encountered a ransomware attack. So the IT people got their Christmas completely ruined. And that was not fun, I would say. So, but I guess we are gonna dig into stuff like that later.
And Angelo.
Hey there, Angelo Luchi with Proofgeist and Automatic. Proofgeist is a development shop. We have a hosting platform for FileMaker as well. We, of course, hear all kinds of stories from good, bad to ugly. Most recent, were the AWS incident last month, and most recently the Cloudflare incident just a few days ago. Wreaking havoc with a lot of people's subservice providers. Like most of you, I'm sure you guys are using stacks that include React and other things, and those services tend to be vulnerable to this type of issue. We'll get into that later on.
And Wim.
My name is Wim Decorte. I'm with Soliant Consulting. An outage that was really interesting for me, that really opened my eyes to this topic of business continuity over and beyond just having backups and the ability to restore backups, was when we had developed a system that would take applications. And the applications, the whole promise to the client was the application would be processed really quickly in a matter of hours, and money would be dispersed in their accounts. And there was a total failure on the electrical and networking side. Not even the servers. The servers were up and running. Nobody could connect to that. Which we had to solve by looking at what the system really was and providing the users after the fact, of course, because we weren't ready for that one, by giving them regular exports to Excel so that they can continue to do their work with basically pen and paper while the system was out. So the ability to do business continuity that way was the real eye-opener for me.
Yeah. Well, thanks, everyone. I'll share one that Claris encountered a few weeks ago. The Microsoft Azure outage took down the videos in Claris Academy for an afternoon. So again, this is, we rely on a vendor for the Claris Academy software, and they then rely on Azure for hosting. So that was a bit of a scramble. At least it was not a business critical system in our case. And let me just share out the poll questions that you've all been so kind to answer. So first, what best describes your organization's current business continuity plans for FileMaker systems? About a third have a documented, tested plan that's updated regularly. A quarter, 27%, have a plan that hasn't been tested recently or ever. 23% answered we have informal procedures, but nothing documented. 15% rely on regular backups and hope for the best. And probably 1%, said, what's a business continuity plan? So it sounds to me like you all are doing pretty well, but half of you or so could be doing better. And then as far as what disruption most concerns people, hardware or other infrastructure failures is the highest concern to about half the audience. 30% said ransomware. I think people are still answering. 15% human error or accidental deletion. And about 9 or 10% saying loss of our developer or another key person. And nobody is worried about natural disasters. They must not live in risk-prone areas. So thanks everyone again for sharing your thoughts in our polls. And to get started, just for all of you, what percentage of the FileMaker deployments that you encounter as you're working with new clients have no documented recovery plan? And if you do have any thoughts as to why that might be?
I would say that usually the bigger the clients, the more structured and organized their IT is, the more likely it is that they will either have a plan or insist on a plan, or multiple plans, I should say. I thought that the answer to the question, how many have, and a third have a tested, well-documented plan. I would say we probably need multiple plans, because the worst possible thing is that you react to an outage with a particular plan and it's the wrong plan, right? Because it's the wrong kind of outage. I've seen that happen too. So it probably calls for multiples of these. So I think the numbers that I see out there are probably less than the numbers that we see reflected here in the answers. I would say less than a third have well-documented, well-rehearsed plans.
I agree with that assessment very much. A lot of the customers that we speak with are looking to the providers themselves to help come up with those plans, and we'll help architect those as well.
Yep, I agree. With our clients that are using a third-party IT company, they tend to be the ones that are have a much better plan in place than the smaller ones, which may have just the husband or the son that's their IT for the.
Yeah. Well, we see the same. Actually, I don't think many of our customers have any plans, or at least not something we have tested. When we test something, it's because something happens, which is kind of a little late, right? So I was actually also surprised about how many responded that they have plans in place. But like Wim said, that sometimes you respond to an incident, and it might be the wrong one to respond to. And then there's the tricky ones, like if you happen to get victim of a DDoS attack. There might as well be something going on behind the scenes. So the DDoS attack is a distraction for you. So you try to mitigate that, and then something else and much more bad is actually happening behind the scenes while you're busy trying to mitigate. So that's another kind of thing that we should or think about at least.
What I've learned is like we've got redundancy in our hosting environment galore. We've got 2 data centers, 2 internet paths, 2 of routers, switches, storage arrays, and everything else. And you think you've got yourself covered. And there'll be, as you gave Rosemary, a third party which you don't even think of that will go and stuff things up for you. We had an incident late last year where our DNS provider cancelled our DNS address. And I woke up the morning where no one could get to any of our website, our hosted environments, or anything else, because basically our DNS was no longer being broadcast.
Mhm.
And it's like, yeah, I had no control over that one. So it's how do you handle that?
I
And
also think that.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead.
I just wanted to add that that you would think that the big giants in the industry would be like, yeah, then things are working. But the recent incidents with Amazon, with Azure, with Cloudflare, and I guess Google has also been there,
Mhm.
just shows that it can happen anytime for everyone, and you're not safe just because you select a big brand to take care of your hosting, right? So things can happen.
And to continue on that vein, and just for a second there, when you use these kind of big vendors, there's a shared responsibility, right? And understanding where those limits are, what it is that the vendor is responsible for and will take care of, and what ultimately you are responsible for is something to investigate, right? So that you understand where those limits are and that you can take appropriate action. My personal take on it, and I've written some blog posts going back about 10 years on whose fault is it anyway, right? At the end of the day, what I design for my clients, it's only when the clients can access it, if they can use the solutions, that they will get the value from whatever it is that we're building, and that really makes it my responsibility, right? So at the end of the day, I'm not going to be the one to throw up my hands and say, well, it's should have been AWS shouldn't have gone down, right? Like it's or Azure shouldn't have gone down, or Cloudflare shouldn't have these issues. I think we need to think about the what ifs and go like, but what if it goes down, right? Am I prepared? Do I know what to do? And I think that's where we need to end up at.
Yeah, when to dig into that as well, going through a company's trust center or subservice providers to understand where they're getting their services from is very key in understanding where your faults could come from. So keep an eye on that and make sure you understand the full path of your stack.
Definitely, and just like Kent said that the DNS stopped being broadcast, and that's as far as I see, it's actually one of the biggest challenges we have. If DNS service goes down, then we can't basically do anything on the internet because everything is controlled by the DNS. So that also makes you think about, could we have a failover DNS? Even like we use Cloudflare for DNS and other things, which is normally great because they are really big and have data centers in many places, right? So you would think that that was good, but the other day it was down for some hours, right? Not really the DNS, but again, it didn't really matter because they had some issues there. So a failover DNS might be something that would be interesting to look at, and sometimes the smaller ones flies under the radar or is rarely affected at the same time. So it's not always about bigger is better. Sometimes it's also a good idea if you have, or at least as a backup, some of the smaller ones, or look into them, right?
Yeah, just
If
share a few things from chat here. Just lots of comments on it's always DNS. Um, so figuring out how do you get notified when DNS is down. And Martin from Volvo observed, they had an internal DNS outage.
Mhm.
So everything was up and running, but the IT infrastructure DNS went down.
Well, when we had our DNS issue, we actually do have a failover DNS, but we actually had no way of telling people what it was.
Mm.
So, I mean, in the end, the only way we could get that word out was by emailing, having someone else send an email to a general list saying, "Hey, use this DNS
Mhm.
instead of the first DNS." So it's like, oh yeah, the things that you never consider.
Yeah. So let's move on to that a little bit. So when you're consulting with clients, what risks do you talk to them about? I think you've touched on a few, but what do you discuss with clients, and what do you plan for?
To pick up on the two concerns that were raised in the early questions, because they speak to two different approaches, right? One was your typical outage. My server goes down or my network goes down. Under that scenario, it's really just a matter of how quickly can I get back up and running, right? So that speaks to restore time. And do I have a strategy around making sure that I can minimize the time it takes to get up and running? The other concern that was raised was about accidental deletes and stuff like that. That one speaks more to the number of restore points that you can go
Mhm.
back to, right? Whereas the first one is, I want to have a backup that is as close to the real time as possible. The other one is, can I go back a day, a week, a month to go look at the data that was potentially restored? Two different strategies for backing up, and ideally you want to cover both and not just one or the two. So it's not about choosing. So for me, it really is working backwards from a conversation with the client is that goes something like this. How much data are you willing to lose, right? And how long
Mhm.
can the system be down for? And the answer cannot be, I don't lose any data and the system can never be down for. That's impossible, right? Uh, but the closer you want to get to that answer, the more elaborate your procedures and your testing and everything will be, and the more costly it will be to get there, right? So it's for me, it's working backwards from those two questions.
It's also about doing the risk assessment, where you actually list what can happen and what will the cost be if something goes down, right? So, say you have 20 employees, how much are their salary on an hourly basis? The total amount of salary. Then you have an indication of how costly will it be for the company if the system is down and you cannot do any work, right? You still have to pay the salaries, and you could even include rent and other expenses that it costs to run your business. And then you will also have an indication of so how expensive can it be to do the mitigation plan. So should we have 10 servers out there and do all kinds of things, or should we just have a backup that is running every hour, or whatever it is, right? So I think that's the first place to start. That's to do a risk assessment and say what is the risk here, how likely is it that it will happen, and what is the cost actually if something bad happens, or what if I lose my data, or if I lose a half an hour of data, how long will it take for me to restore that, or the entire team to restore that? If you only create one record an hour, well, that's easy enough, right? But do you have a call center, or are you doing tons of records every hour? Then it will be more costly to restore that. So that's also a key part of the conversation and considerations about what to do, and finding out the cost about both what will it cost and how much can I afford to spend on the mitigations, if that made any sense.
Oh, this is a good question from Giandrea for all of you. How easy do you find this to discuss with your customers?
There's usually some friction involved in this, especially around cost, in my experiences. You know, a lot of people want the top of the line, but don't understand what's involved in that process. And understanding that is key, and communicating that in clear and understandable language is more important there. But yeah, there are ways to go about that, and just be straightforward and say, you know, this price gets you this price gets you this, and hopefully you guys can find middle ground in discussing that, but understanding those options and what's involved would be necessary.
The mechanism that Klaus was mentioning, I think, is a good way to do that. Right? It's basically because it speaks to the value that the solution has to the business. If you go to a risk assessment, instead of approaching this at a more theoretical level, which then to Angelo's point, maybe using nomenclature and terms that they don't understand. But if you boil it down to how much does it cost you if your system is down, right? Then you're speaking the business language, and they can relate to that a little better.
Yeah, I think
I
Brandon
totally agree.
called something out really important in chat too, which is they're working on some automation to know what clients are on which servers, and to make sure that their team has access to the right person to notify in the event of an outage. So it's the business contact or the user contact, not just the billing email address.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this speaks to a point that Kent was making earlier about communication in general, right? Like, for instance, you can have an outage and people go, "Oh, the system is down. I'll go off to lunch or an early lunch," right? And they waste an hour or whatever, and the system is up in 5 minutes. But if there's no communication around this, and you're not talking to the people that need to know, as technicians, first and foremost, most of us we will focus, or we tend to focus on solving the problem, right? Instead of communicating out what it is, what is going to happen, or what people can do to continue their work.
Yeah. We've implemented an incident response plan when we have situations like this, where we have dedicated people for comms, dedicated engineers working on the problem, someone overseeing and coordinating between everything. That way, if incidents do happen, comms are out immediately, people know what's going on, while the engineering team can focus and keep their attention directed in an effort to resolve the issues.
Yeah, actually, many of our smaller customers, they have a list email that goes out to all the users. So sometimes we send to that one because then it's out there. Of course, that depends on the customer whether they want us to post there or not. But it very often it's the simple means that is most effective, I think. But communication is very important.
Something that Ken said way back in the beginning, the cyber attacks, and Klaus brought it up with the ransomware attacks too. We're finding that more customers come to us asking about solutions to that, or at least to have a conversation about that, right? Whereas used to be, disaster recovery, business continuity would be something that we bring up because the clients wouldn't naturally go there. But with the rise of cyber attacks and ransomwares, and the fear that comes with that, people come to us and go like, are we in any danger? What is that we want to do or can do about that? So that's another good way into having the conversation or starting the conversation with customers.
We actually sent out an email to our customers a couple of years before this ransomware attack that I was mentioning, where we offered immutable backups. in order to be able to recover from a ransomware attack. And this particular customer didn't take that offer, which is perfectly fine. They probably had something themselves, but they didn't. So when he called me, he said, yeah, now I know what immutable backups are, and we got it now. But it's kind of a little late. They were actually pretty lucky because apparently their system had a backup that no one knew about, and the hackers didn't find it either. So they got everything encrypted except for that backup that went to some strange place in their system, and they were lucky that they could recover from that one. But they had learned the hard way to put other stuff in place, and they were actually having a very locked down, gate around their premises. But somehow they managed to get in anyways.
I think
I think someone in
ultimately,
the go ahead, Ken.
as Angelo said, it comes down to the cost. And we're a bit more front. We host it, and this is the advantages of hosting, and we look after this, and this for you. So we've already itemized what the advantages of hosting are, and of course that includes the fact that we're doing remote backups. We're looking after all this side of thing for you.
Mm-hmm.
So then there's the other conversation. You host it yourself. You need to look after all those sorts of things. So from that perspective, we're starting with the advantage of hosting is going to cost you this much more, but you get all this for it.
And to turn it on its head a little bit and continuing on, so like the topic of ransomware, it's not just all about our files and our servers, right? Like, it could be the clients too. Like if the whole network gets compromised and people can't use their workstations anymore, your server may be still up and running, but they still can't use the solution because they can't get to it, right? So part of a good strategy may be, do we know who has a credit card, a company credit card, can go out to Best Buy and buy 2 laptops, and do you know where your FileMaker Pro installers are, so you can install FileMaker Pro on the laptop? So it could be those aspects as well that don't necessarily talk to our solutions or the servers.
Mm-hmm.
Someone just made a comment about the backups, and you can never have enough backups. And I think one of the kittle things about the backups is being on different technologies, especially if you get crypto attacked. Having your backups on a different technology is going to protect you from there, or give you more protection. I won't say fully protect you, but give you more protection.
Yeah, different technologies, different service providers. Get some variants in there.
Yeah,
It's
simple
such an
Mac
old
versus Linux versus sort of technologies.
Yeah, it goes back to something that I picked up way back when, and I have white hair, so I've been around for a while. So where it says, like, in backup strategies, the 3-2-1 rule, right? Like, you got to have 3 backups of everything, and the 2 stands for at least on 2 different mediums.
Mm-hmm.
Now, back in the day, they were talking more about floppy disks versus tape and that kind of stuff. But to Ken's point, you can broaden that and go, like, in 2 different ways of where the media is stored, right? Like maybe something on S3 versus something on your own hard drive, different technologies. And the one speaks to having at least one of those backup in a totally different location, right? For quick restoration, yes, you want to have your backups on the machine because that's really fast. They're really there. But in some of the things we're talking about, if the machine goes down or the machine is compromised for whatever reason, you need to be able to retrieve your backups from somewhere else.
True. And then there's also different uses for backups in my experience. There's the typical one that where we often have to restore something from, and that's when a customer calls and said, "Oh, I accidentally deleted all the customers or some invoices or whatever it is," right? So we need to restore some specific data into specific tables, and local backups are really nice to have hourly or even more frequently, depending on the situation and the sizes and so on. And then there's the disaster recovery backups, which I think Wim was speaking more to, where different medias and remote backups and immutable backups, and so on. So in my experience, they have different usage. And one is not a replacement for the other one, right?
And there's a comment in the chats regarding the ransomware snaking its way into your backups, and that's 100% the thing you need to. And that's if you ever get ransomware attacked, identifying when that got into your network, because there's nothing worse than restoring back a week and then discovering that actually the ransomware was sitting there from 4 weeks ago and it just was waiting to attack.
I wonder how many folks in this WebEx have thought about the container data that they're putting into that. So that could potentially be infected as you're putting it in as well, as spreading it through system to system. Something else to consider, taking a look at long-term storage.
Well, now I think you're terrifying all of us.
We're all old and have had experience.
Yes.
I also have, well, there was a talk how easy is it to speak with customers about this, and like Wim said, I'm also seeing that I think mainly because we see the big incidents with the big companies, and there was also an incident where someone in US issued an order to Microsoft to close down an email account. And that really terrified people around here, because they actually shut down an email account to an international prosecutor in Hague. And if that can happen, that one man in the US can shut down a European email account, then what can happen beside that? So a lot of our customers have been much more aware of all these kind of situations where what happens if someone closed down the system, right? It doesn't even have to be an incident where there's an outage or anything. It doesn't have to be North Korean hackers that is hacking your system. It could be a president that is ordering a shutdown of something, right? Because the company or your customer's company ends up on a list of someone he doesn't like, right? So what to do if stuff like that happens? That's in my opinion also something that is you should take into your consideration with your risk assessment, at least from a European standpoint. It's probably different if you're US based.
Oh, questions are coming in fast and furious. So first I'm going to
Really quick.
address this one, which is, does anyone have a template for talking to customers about this, or a template for dealing with scenarios? And I think Klaus had something he's going
I can
to.
share something. It's basically a spreadsheet just done in FileMaker, and it's really rough and not beautiful. But the idea was to start the conversation about risk assessment and put in a mitigation plan. So this is extremely basic. You can get the file if anyone is interested. It's very basic, and you can extend it because risk assessment is a whole discipline in itself. But I took a starting point in a risk assessment tool that we built for an oil drilling company some years ago, and they actually do risk assessment down to a pencil on the oil rig itself, and all the way to how much does it cost if the oil pump goes down. Well, that's like $1 million an hour. Okay, how expensive is it to have it on the shelf so we can replace it within an hour? Well, it costs like $2 million. Okay, so 2 hours, and that's really the risk assessment is the the tool to find out what is the cost if something goes wrong, and how can we mitigate that, and what is the cost to mitigate. So the idea is that you give it a name, so like a server crash. What is the cause of this server crash? Well, file might crash and damage the data structure. What is the effect? Loss of data, loss of production time. So how can we do a mitigation plan? And I have just put in a few things that you could, but here you can estimate the impact, and I just put in a number here, 1,000 to 1,500, but it's like saying how much do you have to pay in salary for the people who cannot work while you're trying to mitigate or you're trying to recover from this incident? What is the likelihood, and how expensive is it to mitigate? So this is the idea where you simply list the different risks that you identify, and basically get you to think about, okay, what should we do? Maybe we shouldn't do anything, because the likelihood, like the DNS outage, is, well, I just said less than 1%, right? So maybe it's not even worth doing the assessment tool or doing the mitigation for that. But putting it into a schema like this or helps you to see really what you should do, or what you could do. Right? Was that any comments from anyone?
I definitely
Just-
like it, right? So it's something that Klaus and I were talking about when we were at Engage You, and following up on Klaus's really excellent, I highly recommend it, presentation at Engage You. So when the videos come out, do have a look at those. I think taking this as sort of like a framework, that's too big a word, but as sort of like an initial guidance to kick you off and come up with these questions, or questions along these lines, is definitely the way to go.
True. And it's a very basic template. It's nothing fancy, and that's actually the point. The content is the most important thing here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just so everyone listening knows, I will share this with the resources when I post the recording later today or tomorrow morning. So once you've done this risk assessment, how do you then work with your clients to prioritize what resilience options are needed?
Well, I find it fairly simple to take that conversation, and I say simple, right, because nothing is really simple, but it's a matter of looking at the points, that the risk that we have identified, and saying how likely is it and how costly is it. So the more likelihoods for this risk to occur, the higher priority it needs to have. And then you can work it from there. And sometimes you can find some low-hanging fruits, like, okay, let's have 100 gigabytes of backup data locally, disk locally, so we can do more backups. That's typically a low-hanging fruit that is not expensive, right? And then it goes to other things, and like Wim said, I had a session at Engage You about mitigating against network attacks and DDoS attacks. And if you are interested, there will be some recordings after that. If you can't wait, I did a session with Richard Carlson, and I guess it's on his YouTube channel. And the nice thing about that particular thing is that everyone can apply it, no matter if your server are hosted on premise, if it's hosted with Wim or with Angelo, or if you're using Kent's system. So everyone could actually use it, because it's the network part where, who's responsible for the internet, right? Or what happens on the network layer outside there. So that's another thing where it can help you with the business continuity.
I think as part of your risk assessment, you're looking at the uptime of your solution, right?
True.
And like one of the questions was, do you on-prem versus hosted in the cloud? Now, there's a variety of things. So one of the risk assessments is if you go for a hosted in the cloud environment, you're adding more layers to accessibility. You're reliant on an internet connection. If you host it in your own environment, then even if your internet's down, you've still got access to your solution. You've potentially got faster access to your solution because it's on the local network. So there are pluses and minuses to which way you go. If you're hosting on your own environment, you've got more backup issues because you're having to deal with the whole hardware resilience, redundancy, the backing up, off-site backups, and those sorts of things. Whereas if you're going with a hosted solution, a lot of that work is taken care of you. So, but at the risk that there's more factors for access to your solution being broken.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where your risk assessment is the biggest driver in terms of which way you head in terms of your backup solutions.
True. Yeah, there's no saying that it's better to host in the cloud or with hosting services or over on premise. Both can be good and bad at the same time, right? So definitely a matter of doing a risk assessment. We also have a customer where even if the internet is going down, well, it's a music venue, so if they have 2,000 people in and they need to get a beer, they should get a beer. So we cannot be reliant on an internet connection that goes down, so they cannot do any sales, right? Then everything is ruined for that event. So on-premise is definitely a plus in that scenario.
To advocate for the other side and not to minimize what both Claus and Kent were saying about adding layers of complexity to something that's in the cloud. One of the benefits of the cloud is that most of it is infrastructure as code, so it's entirely automatable.
Yeah.
We can spin up a standby server or a new server from scratch inside minutes, right? We can rebuild it from snapshot of the volumes that have been taken seconds before. So there's a level of automation that is available to you that is very, very hard to replicate on-prem. So again, this may not be something that you need, but it is something that will come out of the conversation about if you want to get as close to a real-time zero data loss restoration as you want, there are tools that can make it available. And like with most of the things that we talked about here, they come with pros and with pros and cons, and you really need to look at those, right? And really take stock of all of them before you make a decision on those, because because of the added layers of security or the added layers of complexity. You then need to figure out like, okay, what if something goes wrong in those? Like, how do I account for that, right? So you need to do that. I see a bunch of questions that are in the chat. I would definitely invite anybody. Because I don't think we will get to all of those, right, Rosemary? So people should carry that conversation on the community forum, and because it goes in a couple of different directions. There, size of files and high availability and all of those. So definitely we should continue the conversation on the community.
Yep, I am dropping the link to the where I will post the recording and other things in the community right now in chat. And there are a couple of questions about, Claris's potential conversations we've had about offering a standby server. And I know a few of you have been involved in that work. So I don't know. I mean, without giving away the whole product roadmap, I think we can confirm that yes, things are happening.
Yep.
And there's go ahead, Wim.
No, exactly. There is some feelers out there for the standby. So we used to have a standby server in the product back in FileMaker 16, 17. I think on the Claris YouTube channel, you'll find some videos that I've done back then. There should also be a video that I've done back in, I'm going to say 2010, 2011, thereabouts, on how to replicate, basically without an official feature that's a standby server, how you can replicate data and roll it forward into another server and have your own standby server. So that speaks to that high availability and the clustering question that came up there. The bottom line is, if you really want to have this kind of thing, it's entirely feasible to do it, right? What Claris traditionally has been doing is to take that concept and make it really drop dead simple to implement. But it could be done today without even the features that FileMaker is going to build. So it's doable. It's just a level of complexity that goes over and beyond with what we will get whenever Claris releases the feature.
I think the main message here is that business continuity is something that Claris also have their eyes on. And I mean, even the smallest customers rely their business on their FileMaker solution, meaning that even small companies cannot do their daily work if their FileMaker system is down, which means that being having something in place and have plans for business continuity is actually pretty important, even for the small ones that doesn't have the resources to like the big IT companies and doesn't have the same budget. But it's still important, and that's, I think, speaks to why Claris has been looking into this. Maybe someone has also given them a hint that this might be something they should look into. But there is a couple of things coming that speaks to these things, if you don't have anything else in place, at least.
Yeah, so I'll just add that coming very soon is an automated remote backup service from Claris that will, if you have an on-premise FileMaker server, automate backup to Amazon infrastructure, to Claris's infrastructure, same as FileMaker Cloud. So that's coming fairly soon. And then the roadmap to come after that is standby server and more down the road, coming in the next year to 18 months. So just want to add, please let us know what you thought of this session in the chat or in the closing poll. And I just want to call out that our next community live, and I think Tyler's already dropped the link to register in the chat as well, will be a session on the new remote backup service and other updates coming to FileMaker 2025. We're actually shortly today, we'll be releasing a VREV for FileMaker Pro and FileMaker Go. And sometime in the next few weeks, we will also have a FileMaker server update.
There was one question that I want to touch on, if we still have a minute there, Rosemary. Yep. Steve was asking what role falls to Claris for all the FileMaker Cloud customers who want to address continuity planning. I think that goes back to what we were discussing earlier about that shared responsibility, right? It's at the end of the day, when you're hosting with us or with FileMaker Cloud or with any other provider, they will do their best to provide you with the infrastructure to host your files and automate backups and make those backups available. Make sure that you have a running server within a certain service level agreement. At the end of the day, for true business continuity, the final mile, if you will, belongs to the business, right? It's the businesses that run their business, so they need to make sure that they can continue to do that. If I go back to my story there, and that may include some plans for doing pen and paper, right? And having some output from the system at regular intervals so that they can continue even if the system is not available at all. So the answer to Steve's question really is twofold. It depends, but it's not all Claris's responsibility. It's also not all the business's responsibility. There's a point at which it flips over between the two.
See, Angelo, you have a friend this morning.
I always have a friend.
I think the biggest thing with your backups is that they have to be more than one location. I found it interesting that no one said natural disaster, but I mean, one of my stories is one of our clients, which unfortunately was caught up in the Christchurch earthquake, and their on-prem servers were basically in the basement flooded as a result of the natural disaster that occurred, and they had no off-site backup. So, I mean, their backups were in, we've got one server in this building, one server in this building. Unfortunately, the natural disaster removed access to their backup and their live servers. So I mean, I work on the principle of at least 3 different backups technologies employed. You've got I need something 5 minutes from now, but I need my disaster recovery, and you need different backup technologies or processes in place for that. The last thing I was going to throw into that was we have to deal with privacy because of the nature of the data we're dealing with, and that restricts where we can store our data with regards to the privacy rules of our country. So those are things that you have to consider when you're choosing your backup technologies as well, because it's all very well thinking, oh, the data's on site, and then hello, we're storing it over in a country we're not allowed to with our offsite backups.
And that's the same thing we see in the EU. There was actually a mention in the chat that we should also include disgruntled employees. That is actually so true, because all the talks has been about hacker attacks or backups or system going down or hardware failure and so on. But the human factor is actually extremely important to this. It goes both for security and privacy and everything. We had a customer who laid off 2 employees, and they forgot to close down their access to the FileMaker system. And I wasn't notified that they had laid them off and that they needed my assistance. Unfortunately, they went in and emptied the customer database and started trying to shortcut this company and start their own business. So that's actually also one thing that we got into plans around security, and especially when the GDPR came into force about the privacy and personal information, that there has to be a procedure when you're laying off some people. If their devices get stolen, what happens? Who is responsible for closing down the accounts for not only the FileMaker account, but what about the email account or whatever other accounts they have access to? Again, this is a business continuity thing. Luckily, this company didn't went bankrupt, but they could have, because that was quite a serious incident. And they went to court and fought them, but as we are in the EU, we don't have as big what's it called? Damage amounts. So
Liability.
I think, yeah, liability. Yeah. So nothing really happened there other than a costly lawsuit. And that was even not the case. The important thing was that there should have been a plan in place to take care of this.
And just data is the obvious one. It's the strategic changing of data that is not always obvious.
True.
Keep an eye on your people. Loss of key employees or key people with passwords is a big issue in this world here. Someone can have the keys to the kingdom. I was the unfortunate bearer of a solution when the designer of it passed away, and I had to dole out access to certain clients with that. And, if that wasn't arranged beforehand, the people that were using that vertical market solution would have have been lost. So make sure that you've got plans for that in your risk assessments going forward. And something as simple as a credit card expiring on a subservice that you deem critical, like your DNS host, for instance, can shut you down. Make sure you have backups in place for simple things like that.
Yep. Ken's point about data poisoning is really well taken, right? And it speaks to make sure that you have sufficient number of restore points going back deep into the past to be able to overcome that and catch that. And I think those are two things that should be part of the risk assessment too, right? It's not just about the time lost and the inactivity of the people and the loss of orders coming in or through the system at the time. There may also be reputational costs and regulatory costs, right? Like if you get sued by somebody because your data is wrong or your system is not up, that carries a cost that you need to factor into your risk assessment. They can be hard to quantize, but still they should be part of your thinking process in the risk assessment.
It also, we have because of the GDPR, we have put into several systems that when a user wants to do an export that contains personal data, we have a log where things are logged, and we display a dialog to the user that this action is being logged. So we know, first of all, how many people are there, which people, personal information is it, and who did it. So we can go in and see, well, not only us, but the customer can go in and see who did actually do exports from the system. And that can be done to other places where you want to know what is actually going on with your data. And of course, you can build in alerts and so on if something is happening that you find is not acceptable.
As we are just about out of time, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Thank you especially to the panel, and thank you to everyone who participated in the chat. I'm going to try to do some summarization of the chat and share some of those tips in the community today. And as I said, I'll share the risk assessment tool from Claus and whatever else I can dig up. And also just wanted to share that I think we have met our goal. About 2/3 of the people who responded to our closing questions feel somewhat confident to start making a plan, and a little more than a quarter are very confident. And as far as top priority, everyone, about 1/3 said top priority is documenting current procedures and recovery plan. So that sounds like a good starting point. I'm getting thumbs up from the panel that you're doing the right thing. So thank you all. And again, I'm going to drop one more time the link to our December 11th Community Live, where we're going to talk about that FileMaker update and including a demo of remote backup. And my guests for that will be Rick Coleman and Doug Wallace, our platform evangelists. So thank you all for joining me today, and we'll see you in the community and in 3 weeks. Bye, everyone.